Henry Ford did not control anyone's time. He created time itself. Then he sold it to everyone. Before 1913, time belonged to the craftsman. A wheel took as long as it took. A chassis was finished when the builder said it was finished. Variation was inherent in nature. Skill determined duration. But Ford did not accept this. The moving assembly line entered production on April 1st, 1913. The conveyor belt moved at a fixed speed. Workers did not move with the product. The product moved past the workers. Time transferred from human decisions to mechanical rhythm. Each task was reduced to its smallest repeatable unit. Install the bolt, tighten, repeat. Attach the panel, align, repeat. A single action, measured in seconds, optimized, fixed. The initial assembly time for a Model T chassis, 12 hours, 28 minutes. After the production line, 1 hour, 33 minutes. This cycle repeats. The system did not require skill. It only required conformity to tempo. A trained machinist performed the same function as an untrained worker. Previous experience had no value. Only synchronization with the belt mattered. Speed was standard. Deviation meant elimination. Workers who could not keep up with the rhythm were fired. We could say they were downsized. But the production line did not slow down. Replacements were brought in immediately. The system corrected itself through substitution. Between 1913 and 1914, annual worker turnover rates at Ford factories exceeded 370%. There was not a failure. This was a filtration system. The system identified and expelled incompatible components. What remained was a workforce shaped according to mechanical rhythm. Product variety was eliminated simultaneously. The Model T was offered in a single configuration. Any customer could have a car in any color they wanted, as long as it was black. This was not a matter of preference. Black enamel dried fastest. Faster drying meant faster production. Faster production meant more units per cycle. Standardization served speed. Speed served volume. This was not the final layer. The cycle progressed this way. The production line created a closed circuit. Workers assembled cars. Workers received wages in return. Workers began buying cars. The wages existed to feed the system that produced them. On January 5, 1914, Ford announced the $5 workday. This was not generosity. This was not ethics. This was mechanical necessity. High worker turnover disrupted production tempo. Training new workers took time. Time determined production volume. Production volume determined profit. The $5 minimum wage stabilized the workforce. It also expanded the consumer base. Workers now had the power to purchase the product they produced. The loop tightened. Production fed consumption. Consumption justified production. But this wage had conditions. The Ford Sociology Department was established. Investigators entered workers' homes. They examined spending habits, cleanliness, sobriety, marital status, savings patterns. Workers who gambled, consumed excessive alcohol, or lived in unapproved conditions were not given the $5 wage. They continued to receive base pay until compliance was confirmed. The system continued to operate. Ford did not purchase labor. He purchased time in its purest form. 8 hours belonged to the factory, but the remaining 16 hours were also under surveillance. Workers were turned into efficient consumers. Their rest was to restore their work capacity. Their purchases were to sustain the production that employed them. The production line redefined temporal ownership. Time was no longer personal. It became a company asset. something measured, allocated, controlled. The conveyor belt moved at 6 feet per minute. Each worker had exactly 1.19 minutes to complete their assigned task. The vehicle did not wait. The worker either adjusted or was replaced. Human rhythm was subordinate to industrial rhythm. By 1927, over 15 million Model Ts had been produced, each one identical in structure, each one assembled in the same sequence. Each worker repeated the same movement thousands of times per shift. Repetition replaced thought. Muscle memory replaced decision-making. This structure expands further. Ford's methods spread beyond automotive production. Meatpacking plants adopted the disassembly line, electronics, textiles, food processing. The logic was universal. Break the process into fragments. Assign each fragment a fixed duration. Eliminate human variability. Optimize for throughput. The fragmentation of labor created a new type of worker. Not a craftsman, not an artisan, a component. Interchangeable, replaceable, disposable. Workers did not own the product of their labor. They did not own their own time during the shift. And through the sociology department's surveillance, they did not fully own their time outside the shift either. The system extended beyond the factory Critics called walls. It dehumanizing. Ford said it was efficient. The terminology used was irrelevant. The system functioned. Production increased. Costs decreased. Profit margins expanded. The next stage explains why. Ford's factories operated on the principle of vertical integration. Raw materials entered one end, finished vehicles exited the other. Ore mines, rubber plantations, lumber forests, glass factories, all were owned by the company, all were controlled. The supply chain was internalized, external dependency was minimized. The system fed itself. The River Rouge complex in Dearborn, Michigan, became operational in 1928. 16 million square feet of factory space, 100,000 workers at peak capacity. Iron ore arrived by ship, turned into steel, into engine blocks, and ultimately into automobiles. All of this happening in a single facility. The time from raw material to finished automobile, 41 hours. This was not merely production. This was total process control. Every stage measured, every input calculated, every output predicted. Model T production was discontinued in 1927, not because it failed, but because the system needed evolution. The Model A introduced variety, colors, options, configurations, but the fundamental structure remained the same. Time was still divided. Tasks were still standardized. Workers were still synchronized to the production line. This pattern repeats. Ford's assembly line did not invent mass production. It perfected temporal control within mass production. Previous factories produced in batches, while Ford's factory produced in continuous flow. The difference was the elimination of pause between units. The worker could not pause. The line was in constant motion. Bathroom breaks were scheduled. Conversations were prohibited. Focus was mandatory. The system did not account for human inconsistency. Industrial accidents increased during the early years of the assembly line. Fatigue-related errors, repetitive strain injuries, psychological breakdowns from monotony. The system adapted. Task rotation was introduced. Shift lengths were optimized, not for worker well-being, but for sustained productivity. Ford's methods were studied worldwide. Soviet planners visited Detroit. Japanese industrialists observed the production line. European manufacturers copied the model. The system transcended national boundaries. Because the logic was not capitalist or socialist, it was industrial, maximize output, minimize waste, control variables, standardize the process. This is not the final layer. The assembly line created a psychological shift. Workers stopped seeing the whole. They only saw their own fragment. Install the bolt. Tighten. Repeat. The car was an abstraction. Only the task was real. This fragmentation extended to knowledge. Workers no longer needed to understand the vehicle. They needed to understand their 1.19 minutes. Specialization turned into hyper-specialization. Expertise turned into micro-expertise. Ford himself acknowledged this. He stated that most factory jobs required no skill whatsoever. 43% of jobs required 1 day or less of training. 36% required between 1 day and 1 week of training. Only 21% required more than 1 week of training. This was done intentionally. Skilled labor was expensive. Skilled labor was difficult to replace. Skilled labor had bargaining power. The system eliminated the need for skilled labor. By reducing tasks to simple, repetitive movements, Ford reduced worker power. A worker became as replaceable as a machine part. Training time shortened. Hiring flexibility increased. Labor costs stabilized. The system continues to operate. The $5 wage bought not only labor but compliance. Workers tolerated monotony because the compensation they received was better than alternatives. Economic incentive suppressed resistance. Union organizing efforts were met with force. The Ford Service Department employed thousands. Officially, they maintained order. Functionally, they suppressed dissent. Strikes were broken. Organizers were beaten. The system protected itself. This situation was not unique to Ford, but Ford systematized it. Labor control was integrated into production control. The assembly line not only organized parts, it organized people. The River Rouge plant had its own police force, its own fire department, its own hospital, and its own power plant. The factory had become a self-sufficient entity. Workers entered through the gates and stepped into a controlled environment. Every variable was managed. This structure expands further. Modern production inherited this framework. The terminology changed. Lean manufacturing, just-in-time delivery, Six Sigma. The core logic remained the same. Eliminate waste, standardize the process, measure everything, control time. Amazon warehouses use task timers. Each action has an expected duration. Deviations are flagged. Patterns of deviation trigger review. The worker is monitored by the system in real time. Fast food kitchens operate on assembly logic. Each station performs one function. Burgers move down the line. Assembly time is measured in seconds. The worker does not prepare food. They only execute a step. Call centers measure handle time. The duration of each customer interaction is tracked. Efficiency is calculated. Scripts are provided. Deviation from script is not encouraged. The conversation becomes a standard unit. The system adapted. It no longer needs a physical conveyor belt. Digital systems perform the same function. Software monitors keystrokes. Algorithms assign tasks. Productivity metrics replace the foreman's stopwatch. The next stage explains why. Ford's innovation was not the automobile. It was transforming human labor into a predictable, measurable, and controllable cycle. Time became divisible. Work became modular. Humans became a variable to be optimized. This logic now extends beyond production. Knowledge work is tracked. Number of emails per hour. Number of lines of code per day. Weekly client meetings. The fragmentation continues, tracked individually. The assembly line demonstrated that complex processes could be subdivided infinitely, and once subdivided, Each part could be measured, timed, and optimized separately. The whole lost its importance. Only the parts mattered. Workers on Ford's production line could not see how the entire car was being built. Today's office workers cannot see the entire project either. They can only see the portion assigned to them. The psychological effect is the same for both. Meaning is extracted, purpose becomes obscured. Only task completion remains. Ford did not create alienation. He merely industrialized it, made it efficient, made it profitable. This cycle repeats. The $5 wage has modern equivalents: stock options, performance bonuses, benefits packages, compensation structures designed to secure compliance. Economic incentive suppresses questioning. The sociology department has modern equivalents: corporate culture audits, mandatory training on company values, performance reviews that assess attitude and alignment. Monitoring continues. The mechanism is refined. Ford proved that workers would accept repetitive, meaningless tasks in exchange for adequate compensation, and that society would perceive this as progress. Higher wages, lower prices, easier access to goods. The system justified itself through material output. The assembly line did not end. It continued to spread. From factories to offices, from physical products to digital services, from production to information processing. The core principle remains unchanged. Subdivide the process, measure the components, standardize the execution, control the time. Ford's legacy is not the automobile. It is the normalization of temporal control, the acceptance that work time is not personal time, the belief that efficiency justifies monotony, the assumption that the system's continuation is inevitable. Model T production ended in 1927, but the production logic did not end. It spread, evolved, and embedded itself into economic structure. Today's workers do not stand beside a conveyor belt, but they operate within the same framework. Tasks are assigned. Duration is expected. Output is measured. Deviations are corrected. The system continued to operate. Ford did not control time. He demonstrated that time could be owned, divided, sold, enforced, and once this was demonstrated, the principle could not be reversed. The assembly line was not an invention. It was a proof of concept. Proof that human activity could be reduced to a mechanical process. Proof that individuals could be subordinated to the system. Proof that this subordination could be made economically rational. The system did not stop. It only changed form.